longevity storytelling. I didn't get it. We are going to be reading a story. But first up, we are going to be reading the Bible. Then we are going to be doing the synopsis with Dad. Then we are going to be reading The Princess Bride by
S. Morgenstern.
S. Morgenstern, yeah.
And it's abridged by William Goldman.
Anniversary.
I don't think they sell the unabridged version.
But I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell and never miss another video. I'm going to give it to my dad. Hope you guys enjoy the video. I know I will.
Okay, if y'all need to do something, then this would be a good time. Or maybe right after the Bible time during the synopsis.
Yes, that would be a great time.
Okay, so, hi. How are you?
Ed's yelling doesn't disturb you.
I think that a little more light might be in order. Hello, Jessica. And I've got some... Sorry about this. What?
Do you know my little yarn thing is? Like the...
I know.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, so this is all stuff we could do before it starts. How are we doing? This is Rebecca. Is there? Hi, Rebecca. How is lol? I see a lol. All right, so we have been reading the book of Esther. We've read 3 chapters so far. Now we're going to read the 4th. This is the English Standard Version of the Old Testament. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went out into the midst of the city. And he cried out with a loud and bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one was allowed to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. And in every province, wherever the king's command and his decree reached, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting and weeping and lamenting, and many of them lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's young women and her eunuchs came out and told her, the queen was deeply distressed. She sent garments to clothe Mordecai, so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was. Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her, and command her to go to the king to beg his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people. And Hathach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and commanded him to go to Mordecai and say, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law to be put to death, except the one whom the king holds out the golden scepter so that he may live. But as for me, I have not been called to come in to the king for 30 days. And they told Mordecai what Esther had said. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for your Jews from another place. Rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. So the plot thickens there, and we will see what happens in the next chapter. So, for the synopsis for The Princess Bride, let's see. I know that one chapter that we read. All right, so whenever I get thrust upon a synopsis, I have to go and actually realize what I read. Let's see. There's the Zoo of Death that has 5 levels, and the 5th level is empty because the prince doesn't know what... Oh, whoa. Here she is, the one, the only!
Kimberly. Kimberly's not here.
Daniel.
One more, you're out.
Sorry, I'm not really feeling very well today. I woke up at 4 and couldn't get back to sleep. Yay! I'm trying my best. So Prince Humperdinck, he has this zoo, and it's full of a ton of dangerous creatures, and he's got speed. He has strength creatures. He has JJ. He has like poisonous and mainly reptilian creatures, like 'cause yeah, and I forget what his 4th category was.
Super dangerous creatures.
Oh yeah, his super dangerous creatures. And then there was one, the 5th floor, and it was left uninhabited because it was supposed to be like this super really amazingly terrifying beast that would be able to rival him. So he's like waiting for this monstrous beast that would be a challenge for him, and etc. But what happens is his dad is about to die. So that means that he gets to become king, and he doesn't want to be king really. So what happens is he has to choose a queen before his dad dies. Or it's not exactly before, but he wants to get a head start, I guess. So, this guy, he's like, hey, there was this, country that was, like, next door, and,
Gilder.
yeah, Gilder, and they're, like, arch enemies, so they're like, we'll see if they want to marry, me. Like their princess, and then he found out she was bald.
How many pages did it have for them summoning the princess?
It had like
20.
No.
It had over 50 in just going over there, getting the letter, packing up, and then unpacking. It had like 50 pages.
Wait, quick comment. This book must have taken a lifetime. The other version, it must have taken a lifetime to make.
To read.
It was 66 pages.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, I was actually pretty close.
Oh wait. That was the other cut.
Oh.
Yeah. He like just chopped a whole bunch of this book.
Yeah, he chopped it to pieces.
But in the end, the princess didn't work out because
she was bald, and he's like,
I am not marrying a bald woman.
yeah. And then
So, cancel culture.
yeah. And then what happened was, this other guy's, he's like, so you don't want to marry the bald person? Understandable. You know, I
Who's
have
the other guy? Count Rugen.
Count Rugen. Okay. So Count Ruben, he's like, okay, I found this person a while back, and she was like really pretty, and she's a milkmaid. And he's like, a milkmaid. He goes over and sees her.
Perfect!
And then he's like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna go up to her and attempt to propose. This is how his proposal went. Marry me or die.
Isn't that just so romantic?
Perfect!
Ladies, wouldn't you just love that?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no. He has no idea how to propose. And she...
He's a schlump.
Yes!
He's a schmuck.
And then what happened was she's like, okay. And since she was a commoner, they were like, you know, we can't have the prince. This was in part of the cut. We can't have the prince marrying this commoner, so we'll make her the princess of this little town.
Hammersmith.
Yep. So she's the princess of Hammersmith. And then it goes fast forward like 2 years. 3. It's 3 years where she learns to be a princess, and that was all in the actual book. So, real chopping to pieces.
Yeah, actually, they cut the whole chapter 4 out completely about her learning how to be a princess.
And then
Skip chapter 4 and go to 5.
Well, there's a 1-page synopsis of what he cut.
And then
That's why I like this this abridgment, because it's really good. I might be getting some text messages during this.
yeah. So then what happened was she has her official greeting with the kingdom, and everybody's like, I love her. Some people were jealous, and only 2 or 3 were planning to murder her. Honestly, a pretty good amount. But
Wait, 3 people want to murder her?
yeah. But
oh,
honestly,
you know what? I bet it's the Spaniard and the Turkish giant, and the Sicilian.
you've got cuts.
Yes. All right.
So then what happened was she went riding on her horse. And then these guys are like, hey, we're circus performers. We're lost. Is there a town nearby? And she's like, no. Then they're like, then no one can hear you scream. And then they knock her out and take her onto this boat. And then she jumps off the boat after hearing their plans to kill
I'm
her.
disappointed in this scene.
And then this guy's like, if you don't come back on this boat right now, there are sharks in this water. And if sharks smell blood, then they're gonna go crazy. And I'll drip my blood into the ocean, and then, like, 'cause he'd cut himself and then put it in a cup and then throw the cup in the water and make the sharks go crazy. And then it ended right when he threw the cup.
I really hated this scene in the book. I think shrieking eels are way cooler.
Yeah, shrieking eels are cooler. All right, so I agree that there are some things that the book does better, and there are some things that the movie does better. And I think that the shrieking eels is a better sequence than sharks, because sharks are pretty boring.
Plus, cutting yourself is weird.
And cutting yourself is weird. All right, so we are beginning now with a little interlude where he stopped the story. There's obviously a cut here. She does not get eaten by the sharks at this time. Should I just insert eels? She does not get eaten by the eels at this time, my father said. I looked up. What? You looked like you were getting too involved and bothered, so I thought I would let you relax. Oh, for Pete's sake, I said. You think I was a baby or something? What kind of stuff is that? I really sounded put out. But I'll tell you the truth. I was getting a little too involved, and I was glad he told me. I mean, when you're a kid, you don't think, well, since the book's called The Princess Bride, and since we're barely into it, obviously the author's not about to make shark kibble of his leading lady. You get hooked on things when you're a youngster, so any youngster reading, I simply repeat my father's words since they work to soothe me. She does not get eaten by the eels at this time. Sorry, eels are so much cooler. Then the eels went mad. Should I just replace it with eels?
Yes.
All right, I'll replace it with eels. Then the eels went mad all around her. Buttercup could hear them beeping and screaming and thrashing their mighty tails. Nothing can save me, Buttercup realized. I'm a dead cookie. Fortunately for all concerned, save the eels, it was around this time that the moon came out. "There she is!" shouted the Sicilian, and like lightning the Spaniard turned the boat, and the boat drew close. The Turk reached out a giant arm, and then she was back in the safety of her murderers, while all around them the eels bumped each other in wild frustration. "Keep her warm," the Spaniard said from a tiller, tossing his cloak to the Turk. "Don't catch cold," the Turk said, wrapping Buttercup into his cloak's folds. "It doesn't seem to matter all that much," she answered, "seeing you're going to kill me at dawn." "He'll do the actual work," the Turk said, indicating the Sicilian, who was wrapping cloth around his cuts. "We'll just hold you." "Hold your stupid tongue," the Sicilian commanded. The Turk immediately hushed. "I don't think he's so stupid," Buttercup said, "and I don't think you're so smart either, with all your throwing blood in the water. That's not what I would call grade A thinking." "It worked, didn't it? You're back, aren't you?" The Sicilian crossed toward her. "Once women are sufficiently frightened, they scream." "But I didn't scream. The moon came out," answered Buttercup, somewhat triumphantly. The Sicilian struck her. "Enough of that," the Turk said then. The tiny humpback looked dead at the giant. "Do you want to fight me?" "I don't think you do." "No, sir," the Turk mumbled. "No, but don't use force, please. Force is mine. Strike me if you feel the need. I won't care." The Sicilian returned to the other side of the boat. "She would have screamed," he said. "She was about to cry out. My plan was ideal, as all my plans are ideal. It was the moon's ill timing that robbed me of perfection." He scowled unforgivingly at the yellow wedge above them. Then he stared ahead. "There," the Sicilian pointed out, "the cliffs of insanity!" And there they were, rising straight and sheer from the water 1,000 feet into the night. They provided the most direct route between Florin and Gilder, but no one ever used them, sailing instead the long way, many miles around. Not that the cliffs were impossible to scale. 2 men were known to have climbed them in the last century alone. "Straight sail for the steepest part," the Sicilian commanded. The Spaniard said, "I was." Buttercup did not understand. Going up the cliffs could hardly be done, she thought, and no one had ever mentioned secret passages through them. Yet here they were, sailing closer and closer to the mighty rocks, now surely less than a quarter-mile away. For the first time the Sicilian allowed himself a smile. "All is well. I was afraid your little jaunt in the water was going to cost me too much time. I had allowed an hour of safety. There must still be 50 minutes of it left. We are miles ahead of anybody, and safe, safe, safe." "No one could be following us yet?" the Spaniard asked. "No one," the Sicilian assured him. "It would be inconceivable." "Absolutely inconceivable. Absolutely, totally, and in all other ways inconceivable," the Sicilian reassured him. "But why do you ask?" "No reason," the Spaniard replied. "It's only that I just happened to look back there and something's there." They all whirled. Something was indeed there. Less than a mile behind them, across the moonlight, was another sailing boat, small, painted in what looked like black, with a giant sail that billowed black in the night, and a single man at the tiller. A man in black. The Spaniard looked at the Sicilian. "It might just be some local fisherman out for a pleasure cruise among a night through eel-infested waters." I changed it for you. "There is probably a more logical explanation," the Sicilian said, "but since no one in Gilder could know yet what we've done, and no one in Florin could have gotten here so quickly, he is definitely not, however much it may look like, following us. It is coincidence and nothing more." "He's gaining on us," the Turk said. "That is also inconceivable," the Sicilian said. "Before I stole this boat we're in, I made many inquiries as to what was the fastest ship in all of Florin Channel, and everyone agreed this is the one." "You're right," the Turk agreed, staring back. "He isn't gaining on us. He's just getting closer, that's all." "It's the angle we're looking from and nothing more," said the Sicilian. Buttercup could not take her eyes from the great black sail. Surely the 3 men she was frightened she was with frightened her, but somehow, for reasons she could never begin to explain, the man in black frightened her more. "All right, look sharp," the Sicilian said then, just a drop of edginess in his voice. The cliffs of insanity were very close now. The Spaniard maneuvered the craft expertly, which was not easy, and the waves were rolling in toward the rocks now, and the spray was blinding. Buttercup shielded her eyes and put her head straight back, staring up into the darkness toward the top, which seemed shrouded and out of reach. Then the humpback bounded forward, and as the ship reached the cliff face, he jumped up, and suddenly there was a rope in his hand. Buttercup stared in silent astonishment. The rope, thick and strong, seemed to travel all the way up the cliffs. As she watched, the Sicilian pulled at the rope again, and again it held firm. It was attached to something at the top, a giant rock, a towering tree, something. "Fast now," the Sicilian ordered. "If he is following us, which of course is not within the realm of human experience, but if he is, we've got to reach the top and cut the rope off before he can climb up after us." "Climb?" Buttercup said. "I would never be able to." "Hush!" the Sicilian ordered her. "Get ready!" He ordered the Spaniard. "Sink it!" He ordered the Turk. And then everyone got busy. The Spaniard took a rope, tied Buttercup's hands and feet. The Turk raised a great leg and stomped down at the center of the boat, which gave way immediately and began to sink. Then the Turk went to the rope and took it in his hands. "Load me," the Turk said. The Spaniard lifted Buttercup and draped her body across the Turk's shoulders. Then he tied himself to the Turk's waist. Then the Sicilian hopped, clung to the Turk's neck. "All aboard!" the Sicilian said. This was before trains, but the expression comes originally from carpenters loading lumber, and this was well after carpenters. With that, the Turk began to climb. It was at least 1,000 feet, and he was carrying the three, but he was not worried. When it came to power, nothing worried him. When it came to reading, he got knots in the middle of his stomach, and when it came to writing, he broke out in a cold sweat, and when addition was mentioned, or worse, long division, he always changed the subject right away. But strength had never been his enemy. He could take the kick of a horse on his chest and not fall backward. He could take 100-pound flour sack between his legs and scissor it open without thinking. He had once held an elephant aloft using only the muscles in his back. But his real might lay in his arms. There had never, not in 1,000 years, been arms to match Fezik's, for that was his name. The arms were not only gargantuan and totally obedient and surprisingly quick, but they were also, and this is why he never worried, tireless. If you gave him an axe and told him to chop down a forest, his legs might give out from having to support so much weight for so long, or the axe might shatter from the punishment of killing so many trees. But Fezik's arms would be as fresh tomorrow as today, and so, even with the Sicilian on his neck, and the princes around his shoulders, and the Spaniard at his waist, Fezzik did not feel in the least bit put upon. He was actually quite happy, because it was only when he was requested to use his might that he felt he wasn't a bother to everybody. Up he climbed, arm over arm over arm, 200 feet now above the water, 800 feet now to go. More than any of them, the Sicilian was afraid of heights. All of his nightmares, and they were never far from him when he slept, dealt with falling. So this terrifying ascension was most difficult for him, perched as he was on the neck of the giant, or should have been most difficult, but he would not allow it. From the beginning, when as a child he realized his humped body would never conquer worlds, he relied on his mind. He trained it, fought it, brought it to heel. So now, 300 feet in the night and rising higher, while he should have been trembling, he was not. Instead, he was thinking of the man in black. There was no way anyone could have been quick enough to follow them, and yet from some devil's world that billowing black sail had appeared. How? How? The Sicilian flogged his mind to find an answer, but he found only failure. In wild frustration, he took a deep breath and in spite of his terrible fears, he looked back down toward the dark water. The man in black was still there, sailing like lightning toward the cliffs. He could not have been more than a quarter mile from them now. "Faster!" the Sicilian commanded. "I'm sorry," the Turk answered meekly. "I thought I was going faster." "Lazy, lazy!" spurred the Sicilian. "I'll never improve," the Turk answered, but his arms began to move faster than before. "I cannot see too well because your feet are locked around my face," he went on. "So could you tell me, please, if we're halfway yet?" "A little over, I should think," said the Spaniard from his position around the giant's waist. "You're doing wonderfully, Vezek." "Thank you," said the giant. "And he's closing on the cliffs." Oh, sorry, that was the Spaniard. You have to forgive me if I get the names, the voices wrong. "And he's closing on the cliffs," added the Spaniard. No one had to ask who he was. 600 feet now, the arms continued to pull over and over. 620 feet, 650, now faster than ever. 700. "He's left his boat behind," the Spaniard said. "He's jumped onto a rope. He's starting up after us." "I can feel him," Vezek said, "his body weight on the rope. He'll never catch up," the Sicilian said. "Inconceivable!" "You keep a-using that word," the Spaniard snapped. "I don't think it means what you think it does." "How fast is he climbing?" Vezek said. "I'm frightened," was the Spaniard's reply. The Sicilian gathered his courage again and looked down. The man in black seemed almost to be flying. Already he had cut their lead 100 feet, perhaps more. "I thought you were supposed to be so strong," the Sicilian shouted. "I thought you were this great mighty thing, and yet he gains." "I'm carrying 3 people," Vezek explained. "He has only himself and—" "Excuses are the refuge of cowards," the Sicilian interrupted. He looked down again. The man in black had gained another 100 feet. He looked up now. The cliff tops were beginning to come into view. Perhaps 150 feet more, and they were safe. Tied hand and foot, sick with fear, Buttercup wasn't sure what she wanted to happen. Except this much she knew. She didn't want to go through anything like it again. "Fly, Fezzik!" the Sicilian screamed. 100 feet to go! Fezzik flew. He cleared his mind of everything but ropes and arms and fingers, and his arms pulled, and his fingers gripped, and his rope held taut, and— "He's over halfway," the Spaniard said. "Halfway to doom is where he is," the Sicilian said. "We're 50 feet from safety, and once we're there, I'll untie the rope." He allowed himself a laugh. 40 feet. Fezzik pulled. 20. 10. It was over. Fezzik had done it. They had reached the top of the cliffs, and first the Sicilian jumped off, and then the Turk removed the princes, and as the Spaniard untied himself, he looked back over the cliffs. The man in black was no more than 300 feet away. "It seems a shame," the Turk said, looking down alongside the Spaniard. "Such a climber deserves better than—" He stopped talking then. The Sicilian had untied the rope from its knots around the oak. The rope seemed almost alive, the greatest of all water serpents, heading at last for home. It whipped across the cliff tops, spiraled into the moonlit channel. The Sicilian was roaring now, and he kept at it until the Spaniard said, "He did it." "Did what?" The humpback came scurrying to the cliff edge. "Release the rope in time," the Spaniard said. "See?" He pointed down. The man in black was hanging in space, clinging to the sheer rock face, 700 feet above the water. The Sicilian watched, fascinated. "You know," he said, "since I've made a study of death and dying, and am a great expert, it might interest you to know that he will be dead long before he hits the water. The fall will do it, not the crash." The man in black dangled, helpless in space, clinging to the cliffs with both hands. "Oh, how rude we're being," the Sicilian said then, turning to Buttercup. "I'm sure you'd like to watch." He went to her and brought her, still tied hand and foot, so that she could watch the final pathetic struggle of the man in black 300 feet below. Buttercup closed her eyes, turned away. "Shouldn't we be going?" the Spaniard asked. "I thought you were telling us how important time was." It is, the Sicilian nodded, "but I just can't miss a death like this. I could stage one of these every week and sell tickets. I could get out of the assassination business entirely. Look at him. Do you think his life is passing before his eyes? That's what the books say." "He has very strong arms," Fezzik commented, "to hold on so long." "He can't hold on much longer," the Sicilian said. "He has to fall soon." It was at that moment that the man in black began to climb. Not quickly, of course, and not without great effort, but still there was no doubt that he was, in spite of the sheerness of the cliffs, heading in the upward direction. "Inconceivable!" the Sicilian cried. The Spaniard whirled on him. "Stop saying that word. It was inconceivable that anyone could follow us, but when we looked beyond, there was the man in black. It was inconceivable that anyone could sail as fast as we could sail, and yet he gained on us. Now this too is inconceivable, but look! Look!" And the Spaniard pointed down through the night. "See how he rises?" The man in black was indeed rising. Somehow, in some almost miraculous way, his fingers were finding holds in the crevices, and he was now perhaps 15 feet closer to the top, farther from death. The Sicilian advanced on the Spaniard now, his wild eyes glittering at the insubordination. "I have the keenest mind that has ever been turned to unlawful pursuits," he began. "So when I tell you something, it is not guesswork, it is fact. And the fact is that the man in black is not following us. A more logical explanation would be that he is simply an ordinary sailor who dabbles in mountain climbing as a hobby, who happens to have the same general final destination as we do. That certainly satisfies me, and I hope it satisfies you. In any case, we cannot take the risk of his seeing us with the princess, and therefore one of you must kill him." "Shall I do it?" the Turk wondered. The Sicilian shook his head. "No, Fezzik," he said finally. "I need your strength to carry the girl. Pick her up now, and let us hurry along." He turned to the Spaniard. "We'll be heading directly for the frontier of Gilder. Catch up as quickly as you can once he's dead." The Spaniard nodded. The Sicilian hobbled away. The Turk hoisted the princess, began following the humpback. Just before he lost sight of the Spaniard, he turned and hollered, "Catch up quickly!" "Don't I always?" the Spaniard waved. "Farewell, Fezzik." "Farewell, Inigo," the Turk replied, and then he was gone, and the Spaniard was alone. Inigo moved to the cliff edge and knelt with the customary quick grace. 250 feet below him now, the man in black continued his painful climb. Inigo lay flat, staring down, trying to pierce the moonlight and find the climber's secret. For a long while Inigo did not move. He was a good learner, but not a particularly fast one, so he had to study. Finally, he realized that somehow, by some mystery, the man in black was making fists and jamming them into the rocks and using them for support. Then he would reach up with his other hand until he found a high split in the rock, and make another fist and jam it in. Whenever he could find support for his feet, he would use it, but mostly it was the jammed fists that made the climbing possible. Inigo marveled. What a truly extraordinary adventurer this man in black must be. He was close enough now for Inigo to realize that the man was masked, a black hood covering all but his features. Another outlaw? Perhaps. Then why should they have to fight, and for what? Inigo shook his head. It was a shame that such a fellow must die, but he had his orders, and so there it was. Sometimes he did not like the Sicilian's commands, but what could he do? Without the brains of the Sicilian, he, Inigo, would never be able to command jobs of this caliber. The Sicilian was a master planner. Inigo was a creature of the moment. The Sicilian said kill him, so why waste sympathy on the man in black? Some day someone would kill Inigo, and the world would not stop to mourn. He stood now, quickly jumping to his feet, his blade-thin body ready for action. Only the man in black was still many feet away. There was nothing to do but wait for him. Inigo hated waiting. So, to make the time more pleasant, he pulled from the scabbard his only love, the six-fingered sword. How it danced in the moonlight! How glorious and true! Inigo brought it to his lips, and with all the fervor in his great Spanish heart, kissed the metal. And then we have a section that is called Inigo. So let's go ahead and get started with that. In the mountains of central Spain, set high in the hills above Toledo, was the village of Arabella. It was very small, and the air was always clear. That was all you could say that was good about Arabella. Terrific air you could see for miles. But there was no work. The dogs overran the streets, and there was never enough food. The air, clear enough, was also too hot in the daylight, freezing at night. As to Inigo's personal life, he was always just a trifle hungry. He had no brothers or sisters, and his mother had died in childbirth. He was fantastically happy because of his father. Domingo Montoya was funny-looking and crotchety and impatient and absent-minded and never smiled. Inigo loved him totally. Don't ask why. There really wasn't any one reason you could put your finger on. Oh, probably Domingo loved him back, but love is many things, none of them logical. Domingo Montoya made swords. If you wanted a fabulous sword, did you go to Domingo Montoya? If you wanted a great balanced piece of work, did you go to the mountains behind Toledo? If you wanted a masterpiece, a sword for the ages, was it Arabella that your footsteps led you to? Nope. You went to Madrid, because Madrid was where lived the famous Esther, and you had the money and he had the time. If you had the money and he had the time, you got your weapon. Esther was fat and jovial and one of the richest and most honored men in the city, and he should have been. He made wonderful swords, and noblemen bragged to each other when they owned an original Esther. But sometimes, not often, mind you, maybe once a year, maybe less, a request would come in for a weapon that was more than even Esther could make. When that happened, did Esther say, "Alas, I am sorry, I cannot do it"? Nope. What he said was, "Of course, I'd be delighted. 50% down payment, please. The rest before delivery. Come back in a year. Thank you very much." The next day he would set out for the hills behind Toledo. "So, Domingo," Esther would call out when he reached Inigo's father's hut. "So, Esther," Domingo Montoya would return from the hut doorway. Then the two men would embrace, and Inigo would come running up, and Esther would rumple his hair, and then Inigo would make tea while the two men talked. "I need you," Esther would always begin. Domingo would grunt. "This very week I have accepted a commission to make a sword for a member of the Italian nobility. It is to be jewel-encrusted at the handle, and the jewels are to spell out the name of his present mistress, and no." That single word and that alone, but it was enough. When Domingo Montoya said no, it meant nothing else but. Inigo, busy with tea, knew what would happen now. Esther would use his charm. No. Esther would use his wealth. No. His wit. His wonderful gift for persuasion. No. He would beg, entreat, promise, pledge. No. Insults. Threats. No. Finally, genuine tears. No. More tea, Esther? Perhaps another cup, thank you. Then big. "Why won't you?" Inigo hurried to refill their cups so as never to miss a word. He knew they had been brought up together, had known each other 60 years, had never not loved one another deeply, and it thrilled him when he could hear them arguing. That was the strange thing. Arguing was all they ever did. "Why? My fat friends ask me why. He sits there on the world-class donkey and has the nerve to ask me why. Esther, come to me sometime with a challenge."
Daniel? What? He's making faces at me.
Okay, we can stop now. "Come to me sometime with a challenge. Once, just once, ride up and say, 'Domingo, I need a sword for an 80-year-old man to fight a duel,' and I would embrace you and cry, 'Yes!' Because to make a sword for an 80-year-old man to survive a duel, that would be something, because the sword would have to be strong enough to win, yet light enough to not to tire this weary arm. I would have to use my all to perhaps find an unknown metal, strong but very light, or devise a different formula for a known one, mix some bronze with some iron, and some air in a way ignored for 1,000 years. I would kiss your smelly feet for an opportunity like that, fat Yesta, but to make a stupid sword with jewels in the form of stupid initials to some stupid Italian can thrill his stupid mistress. No, that I will not do. For the last time I ask you, please, for the last time I tell you I am sorry, no. I give my word the sword would be made. Or I gave my word, Yesta said. I cannot make it. In all the world, no one but you, and you say no, which means I have gone back on a commitment, which means I have lost my honor, which means that since honor is the only thing in the world I care about, and since I cannot live without it, I must die, and since you are my dearest friend, I may as well die now, with you, basking in the warmth of your affection. And here Yesta would pull out a knife. It was a magnificent thing, a gift from Domingo on Yesta's wedding day. Goodbye, little Inigo, Yesta would say then. God grant you your quota of smiles. It was forbidden for Inigo to interrupt. That would be a good starting point for our family, too. Goodbye, little Domingo, Yesta would say then. Although I die in your hut, and although it is your own stubborn fault that causes my ceasing. In other words, even though you are killing me, don't think twice about it. I love you as I always have, and God forbid that your conscience should give you any trouble. He pulled his coat, brought the knife closer, closer. The pain is worse than I imagined, Yesta cried. How can it hurt when the point of the weapon is still an inch away from your belly? Domingo asked. I'm anticipating, don't bother me. Let me die unpestered. He brought the point to his skin, pushed. Domingo grabbed the knife away. Someday I won't stop you, he said. Inigo, set an extra place for supper. I was all set to kill myself, truly. Enough dramatics. What is on the menu for the evening? The usual, gruel. Inigo, go check and see if there's anything by chance in the carriage outside. There was always a feast waiting in the carriage, and afterward the food and the stories would come the departure, and always before the departure would come the request. We would be partners, Yesta would say. In Madrid, my name before yours on the sign, of course, but equal partners in all things. No. All right. Your name before mine. You are the greatest sword maker. You deserve to come first. Have a good trip back. Why won't you? Because, my friend Yesta, you are very famous and very rich, and so you should be, because you make wonderful weapons. But you must also make them for any fool who happens along. I am poor, and no one knows me in all the world except you and Inigo, but I do not have to suffer fools. You are an artist, Yesta said. No, not yet. A craftsman only. But I dream to be an artist. I pray that someday, if I work with enough care, if I am very, very lucky, I will make a weapon that is a work of art. Call me an artist then, and I will answer. Yesta entered his carriage. Domingo approached the window, whispered, I remind you only of this. When you get this jewel-initialed sword, claim it as your own. Tell no one of my involvement. Your secret is safe with me. Embraces and waves, the carriage would leave, and that was the way of life before the six-fingered sword. Inigo remembered exactly the moment it began. He was making lunch for them. His father always, from the time he was 6, let him do the cooking. When a heavy knocking came on the hut door. Inside there, a voice boomed. Be quick about it. Inigo's father opened the door. Your servant, he said. You are a sword maker, came the booming voice. Of distinction. I have heard that this is true. If only it were, Domingo replied, but I have no great skills. Mostly I do repair work. Perhaps if you had a dagger blade that was dulling, I might be able to please you, but anything more is beyond me. Inigo crept up behind his father and peeked out. The booming voice belonged to a powerful man with dark hair and broad shoulders, who sat upon an elegant brown horse, a nobleman clearly, but Inigo could not tell the country. I desire to have made for me the greatest sword since Excalibur. I hope your wishes are granted, Domingo said, and now, if you please, our lunch is almost ready. I do not give you permission to move. You stay right exactly where you are, or risk my wrath, which, I must tell you in advance, is considerable. My temper is murderous. Now, what were you saying about your lunch? I was saying that it will be hours before it is ready. I have nothing to do and would not dream of budging. There are rumors, the nobleman said, that deep in the hills behind Toledo lives a genius, the greatest sword maker in all the world. He visits here sometimes. That must be your mistake. But his name is Esther, and he lives in Madrid. I will pay 500 gold pieces of gold. 500 pieces of gold for my desires, said the big-shouldered noble. That is more money than all the men in all this village will earn in all their lives, said Domingo. Truly, I would love to accept your offer, but I am not the man you seek. These rumors lead me to believe that Domingo Montoya would solve my problem. What is your problem? I am a great swordsman, but I cannot find a weapon to match my peculiarities, and therefore I am deprived of reaching my highest skills. If I had a weapon to match my peculiarities, there would be no one in all the world to equal me. What are these peculiarities you speak of? The noble held up his right hand. Domingo began to grow excited. The man had 6 fingers. You see, the nobleman began. Of course, Domingo interrupted, the balance of the sword is wrong for you, because every balance has been conceived of for 5. The grip of every handle cramps you, because it has been built for 5. For an ordinary swordsman it would not matter, but a great swordsman, a master, would have eventual discomfort, and the greatest swordsman in the world must always be at ease. The grip of his weapon must be as natural as the blink of his eye, and cause him no more thought. Clearly you understand the difficulties, the nobleman began, but Domingo had travelled where others' words could never reach him. Inigo had never seen his father so frenzied. The measurements, of course, each finger and the circumference of the wrist, and the distance from the 6th nail to the index pad, so many measurements, and your preferences. Do you prefer to slash or cut? If you slash, do you prefer the right to left movement, or perhaps the parallel? When you cut, do you enjoy an upward thrust, and how much power do you wish to come from the shoulder, how much from the wrist? And do you wish your point coated so as to enter more easily, or do you enjoy seeing the opponents wince? So much to be done, so much to be done. And on he went, until the noble dismounted, and had to almost take him by the shoulders to quiet him. You are the man of the rumors, Domingo nodded. And you will make the greatest sword since Excalibur. I will beat my body into ruins for you. Perhaps I will fail, but no one will try harder. And payment? When you get the sword, then payment. Now let me get to work measuring. Inigo, my instruments. Inigo scurried into the darkest corner of the hut. I insist on leaving something on account. It is not necessary. I may fail. I insist. All right, 1 gold piece. Leave that. But do not bother me with money when there is work that needs beginning. The noble took out 1 piece of gold. Domingo put it in the drawer and left it without even a glance. Feel your fingers now, he commanded. Rub your hands hard. Shake your fingers. You will be excited when you duel, and this handle must match your hand in that excitement. If I measured when you were relaxed, then there would be a difference, as much as 1,000th of an inch, and that would rob us of perfection. And that is what I seek. Perfection. I will not rest for less. The nobleman had to smile. And how long will it take to reach it? Come back in a year, Domingo said, and with that he set to work. Such a year. Domingo slept only when he dropped from exhaustion. He ate only when Inigo would force him to. He studied, fretted, complained. He never should have taken the job. It was impossible. The next day he would be flying. He never should have taken the job. It was too simple to be worth his labors. Joy to despair, day to day, hour to hour. Sometimes Inigo would wake to find him weeping. What is it, father? It is that I cannot do it. I cannot make the sword. I cannot make my hands obey me. I would kill myself except what would you do then? Go to sleep, father. No, I don't need sleep. Failures don't need sleep. Anyway, I slept yesterday. Please, father, a little nap. All right, a few minutes to keep you from nagging. Some nights Inigo would awake to see him dancing. "What is it, father?" "It is that I have found my mistakes, corrected my judgments." "Then it will be done soon, father." "It will be done tomorrow, and it will be a miracle." "You are wonderful, father." "I'm more wonderful than wonderful. How dare you insult me?" But the next night, more tears. "What is it now, father?" "The sword, the sword! I cannot make the sword!" "But last night, father, you said you had found your mistakes." "I was mistaken. Tonight I found new ones, worse ones. I am the most wretched of all creatures. Say you wouldn't mind it if I killed myself so I could end this existence." "But I would mind, father. I love you, and I would die if you stopped breathing." "You don't really love me. You're only speaking pity." "Who could pity the greatest sword maker in the history of the world?" "Thank you, Inigo." "You're welcome, father. I love you back, Inigo." "Sleep, father. Yes, sleep." A whole year of that. A year of the handle being right, but the balance being wrong. Of the balance being right, but the cutting edge too dull. Of the cutting edge sharpened, but that threw the balance off again. Of the balance returning, but now the point was fat. Of the point regaining sharpness, only now the entire blade was too short, and it all had to go, all had to be thrown out, all had to be done again, again. Domingo's health began to leave him. He was fevered always now, but he forced his frail shell on because this had been the finest since Excalibur. Domingo was battling legend, and it was destroying him. Such a year. One night Inigo woke to find his father seated, staring, calm. Inigo followed the stare. The six-fingered sword was done. Even in the hut's darkness it glistened. "At last," Domingo whispered. He could not take his eyes from the glory of the sword. "After a lifetime, Inigo. Inigo, I am an artist!" The big-shouldered nobleman did not agree. When he returned to purchase the sword, he merely looked at it a moment. "Not worth waiting for," he said. Inigo stood in the corner of the hut, watching, holding his breath. "You are disappointed?" Domingo could scarcely get the words spoken. "I'm not saying it's trash, you understand," the nobleman went on, "but it's certainly not worth 500 pieces of gold. I'll give you 10. It's probably worth that." "Wrong," Domingo cried. "It is not worth 10. It is not worth even 1. Here!" And he threw open the door where the 1 gold piece had lain untouched the year. "The gold is yours, all of it. You have lost nothing." He took back the sword and turned away. "I'll take the sword," the nobleman said. "I didn't say I wouldn't take it. I only said I would pay what it was worth." Domingo whirled back, eyes bright. "You quibbled, you haggled. Art was involved, and you saw only money. Beauty was here for the taking, and you saw only your fat purse. You have lost nothing. There is no more reason for your remaining here. Please go." "The sword," the noble said. "The sword belonged to my son," Domingo said. "I give it to him now. It's his forever. Goodbye." "You're a peasant and a fool, and I want my sword." "You are an enemy of art, and I pity your ignorance," Domingo said. They were the last words he ever uttered. The noble killed him then, with no warning. A flash of the nobleman's sword, and Domingo's heart was torn to pieces. Inigo screamed. He could not believe it. It had not happened. He screamed again. His father was fine. Soon they would have tea. He could not stop screaming. The village heard. 20 men were at the door. The nobleman pushed his way through them. "That man attacked me, see? He holds a sword. He attacked me, and I defended myself. Now move from my way." It was lies, of course, and everyone knew it. But he was a noble, so what was there to do? They parted, and the nobleman mounted his horse. "Coward!" The nobleman whirled. "Pig!" Again the crowd parted. Inigo stood there, holding the six-fingered sword, repeating his words. "Coward! Pig! Killer!" "Someone tend the babe before he oversteps himself," the noble said to the crowd. Inigo ran forward then, standing in front of the nobleman's horse, blocking the nobleman's path. He raised the six-fingered sword with both his hands and cried, "I, Inigo Montoya, do challenge you, coward, pig, killer, donkey, fool, to battle." "Get him out of my way. Move the infant." "The infant is 10, and he stays," Inigo said. Enough of your family is dead for one day. Be content, said the noble. When you beg me for your breath, then I shall be contented. Now dismount. The nobleman dismounted. Draw your sword. The nobleman unsheathed his killing weapon. I dedicate your death to my father, Inigo said. Begin. They began. It was no match, of course. Inigo was disarmed in less than a minute. But for the first 15 seconds or so, the noble was uneasy. During those 15 seconds, strange thoughts crossed his mind, for even at the age of 10, Inigo's genius was there. Disarmed, Inigo stood very straight. He said not a word, begged nothing. I'm not going to kill you, the nobleman said, because you have talent and you're brave. But you're also lacking in manners, and that's going to get you in trouble if you're not careful. So I shall help you as you go through your life by leaving you with a reminder that bad manners are to be avoided. And with that his blade flashed 2 times, and Inigo's face began to bleed. 2 rivers of blood poured from the forehead to his chin, one crossing each cheek. Everyone watching knew it then. The boy was scarred for life. Inigo would not fall. The world went white behind his eyes, but he would not go to ground. The blood continued to pour. The nobleman replaced his sword, remounted, rode on. It was only then that Inigo allowed the darkness to claim him. He awoke to Yesta's face. I was beaten, Inigo whispered. I failed him. Yesta could only say, sleep. Inigo slept. The bleeding stopped after a day, and the pain stopped after a week. They buried Domingo, and for the first and last time Inigo left Arabella. His face bandaged, he rode in Yesta's carriage to Madrid, where he lived in Yesta's house, obeyed Yesta's commands. After a month the bandages were removed, but the scars were still deep red. Eventually they softened some, but they always remained the chief features of Inigo's face, the giant parallel scars running one on each side from temple to chin. For 2 years Yesta cared for him. Then one morning Inigo was gone. In his place were 3 words, I must learn, on a note pinned to his pillow. Learn? Learn what? What existed beyond Madrid that the child had to commit to memory? Yesta shrugged and sighed. It was beyond him. There was no understanding children any more. Everything was changing too fast, and the young were different. Beyond him, life was beyond him, the world was beyond him, you name it, it was beyond him. He was a fat man who made swords, that much he knew. So he made more swords, and he grew fatter, and the years went by. As his figure spread, so did his fame. From all across the world they came, begging for weapons. So he doubled the prices, because he didn't want to work too hard anymore. He was getting old, but when he doubled the prices, the news spread from duke to the prince to the king. They only wanted him the more desperately. Now the wait was 2 years for a sword, and the lineup of royalty was unending. And Yesta was growing tired, so he doubled his prices again. And when that didn't stop him, he decided to triple his already doubled and redoubled prices. And besides that, all work had to be paid for in jewels in advance. And the wait was up to 3 years, but nothing would stop them. They had to have swords by Yesta or nothing. And even though the work on the finest was nowhere what it once was, Domingo, after all, no longer could save him. The silly rich men didn't notice. All they wanted was his weapons, and they fell over each other with jewels for him. Yesta grew very rich, and very heavy. Every part of his body sagged. He had only fat thumbs in Madrid. Dressing took an hour, breakfast the same. Everything went slowly. But he could still make swords, and people still craved them. I'm sorry, he said to the young Spaniard who entered his shop one particular morning. The wait is up to 4 years, and even I am embarrassed to mention the price. Have your weapon made by another. I have my weapon, the Spaniard said, and he threw the 6-fingered sword across Yesta's workbench. Such embraces. Never leave again, Yesta said. I eat too much when I'm lonely. I cannot stay, Inigo told him. I'm only here to ask you one question. As you know, I spent the last 10 years learning. Now I have come for you to tell me if I am ready. Ready? Ready for what? What in the world have you been learning? The sword. Madness, said Yesta. You have spent 10 entire years just learning to fence? No, not just learning to fence, Inigo answered. I did many other things as well. Tell me. Well, Inigo began, 10 years is what, about 3,600 days? And that's about, I figured this out once, so I remember pretty well, about 86,000 hours. Well, I always made it a point to get 4 hours of sleep per night. That's 14,000 hours right there, leaving me perhaps 72,000 hours to account for. You slept. I'm with you. What else? Well, I squeezed rocks. I'm sorry, my hearing sometimes fails me. It sounded like you said you squeezed rocks. To make my wrists strong, so I could control the sword. Rocks like apples, that size. I would squeeze them in each hand for perhaps 2 hours a day, and I would spend another 2 hours a day in skipping and dodging and moving quickly so that my feet would be able to get me into position to deliver properly the thrust of the sword. That's another 14,000 hours. I'm down to 58,000 now. Well, I always sprinted 2 hours a day, or 2 hours each day, as fast as I could, so my legs, as well as being quick, would also be strong, and that gets me down to about 50,000. Yesta examined the young man before him, blade thin, 6 feet in height, straight as a sapling, bright-eyed, taut, even motionless. He seemed whippet quick. And these last 50,000 hours, these have been spent studying the sword. Inigo nodded. Or these have been spent studying the sword? That was Yesta, sorry. Inigo nodded. Where? Wherever I could find a master. Venice, Bruges, Budapest. I could have taught you here, true, but you care for me. You would not have been ruthless. You would have said, excellent parry, Inigo. Now that's enough for one day. Let's have supper. That does sound like me, Yesta admitted. But why was it so important? Why was it worth so much of your life? Because I could not fail him again. Fail who? My father. I have spent all these years preparing to find the six-fingered man and kill him in a duel. But he is a master, Yesta. He said as much, and I saw the way his sword flew at Domingo. I must not lose that duel when I find him. So now I have come to you. You know swords and swordsmen. You must not lie. Am I ready? If you say I am, I will seek him through the world. If you say no, I will spend another 10 years, and another 10 after that if it is needed. So they went to Yesta's courtyard. It was late in the morning, hot. Yesta put his body in a chair, and the chair in the shade. Inigo stood waiting in the sunshine. We need not test desire, and we know you have sufficient motive to deliver the death blow, Yesta said. Therefore, we need only to probe your knowledge and speed and stamina. We need no enemy for this. The enemy is always in the mind. Visualize him. Inigo drew his sword. The six-fingered man taunts you, Yesta called. Do what you can. Inigo began to leap around the courtyard, the great blade flashing. He used the Agrippa defense, Yesta shouted. Immediately, Inigo shifted position, increased the speed of his sword. Now he surprised you with Bonetti attack. But Inigo was not surprised for long. Again his feet shifted. He moved his body in a different way. Perspiration was pouring down his thin frame now, and the great blade was blinding. Yesta continued to shout. Inigo continued to shift. The blade never stopped. At 3 in the afternoon, Yesta said, Enough! I'm exhausted from the watching. Inigo sheathed the six-fingered sword and waited. You wish to know if I feel you are ready to duel to the death. A man ruthless enough to kill your father, rich enough to buy protection, older and more experienced, an acknowledged master. Inigo nodded. I'll tell you the truth, and it's up to you to live with it. First, there has never been a master as young as you. 30 years at least before that rank has yet been reached, and you are barely 22. Well, the truth is, you are an impetuous boy, driven by madness, and you are not now, and you never will be, a master. Thank you for your honesty, Inigo said. I must tell you, I had hoped for better news. I find it very hard to speak just now, so if you'll please excuse me, I'll be on my... I had not finished, Yesta said. What else is there to say? I loved your father very dearly, that you know, but this you did not know. When you were very young, not yet 20, we saw with our own eyes an exhibition by the Corsican wizard Bastia. I know of no wizards. It is the rank beyond master in swordsmanship, Yesta said. Bastia is the last man so designated. Long before your birth he died at sea. There have been no wizards since, and you would never in this world have beaten him. But I tell you this, he would never in this world have beaten you. Inigo stood silent for a long time. I am ready, then. I would not enjoy being the six-fingered man, was all Yesta replied. The next morning Inigo began the track down. He had it all carefully prepared in his mind. He would find the six-fingered man. He would go up to him. He would simply say, Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. And then, oh then, the duel. It was a lovely plan, really, simple, direct, no frills. In the beginning, Inigo had all kinds of wild vengeance notions, but gradually simplicity had seemed the better way. Originally, he had all kinds of little plays worked out in his mind. The enemy would weep and beg, the enemy would cringe and cry, the enemy would bribe and slobber and act in every way unmanly, but eventually these too gave way in his mind to simplicity. The enemy would simply say, Oh yes, I remember killing him. I'll be only too delighted to kill you too. Inigo had only one problem. He could not find the enemy. It never occurred to him there would be the least difficulty. After all, how many noblemen were there with 6 fingers on their right hands? Surely it would be the talk of whatever his vicinity happened to be. A few questions. Pardon, I'm not crazy, but have you seen a 6-fingered nobleman lately? And surely, sooner or later, there would be an answering yes. But it didn't come sooner, and later wasn't the kind of thing you wanted to hold your breath for either. The first month wasn't all that discouraging. Inigo crisscrossed Spain and Portugal. The second month he moved to France and spent the rest of the year there. The year following that was his Italian year, and then came Germany and the whole of Switzerland. It was only after 5 solid years of failure that he began to worry. And then he had seen all of the Balkans and most of Scandinavia, and had visited the Florinese and the natives of Gilder and into Mother Russia, and down step by step around the entire Mediterranean. But then he knew what had happened. 10 years learning was 10 years too long. Too much had been allowed to happen. The 6-fingered man was probably crusading in Asia, or getting rich in America, or a hermit in the East Indies, or dead. Inigo, at the age of 27, began having a few extra glasses of wine at night to help him get to sleep. At 28, he was having a few extra glasses to help him digest his lunch. At 29, the wine was essential to wake him in the morning. His world was collapsing around him. Not only was he living in daily failure, something almost as dreadful was beginning to happen. Fencing was beginning to bore him. He was simply too good. He would make his living during his travels by finding the local champion wherever he happened to be, and they would duel, and Inigo would disarm him and accept whatever they happened to bet. And with his winnings he would pay for his food and lodging and his wine. But the local champions were nothing. Even in the big cities, the local experts were nothing. Even in the capital cities, the local masters, were nothing. There was no competition, nothing to help him keep an edge. His life began to seem pointless, his quest pointless, everything without reason. At 30 he gave up the ghost. He stopped his search, forgot to eat, slept only on occasion. He had his wine for company, and that was enough. He was a shell. The greatest fencing machine since the Corsican wizard was barely even practicing the sword. He was in that condition when the Sicilian found him. At first, the little hunchback only supplied him with stronger wine, but then, through a combination of praise and nudging, the Sicilian began to get him off the bottle, because the Sicilian had a dream. With his guile, plus the Turk's strength, plus the Spaniard's sword, they might become the most effective criminal organization in the civilized world, which is precisely what they became. In dark places, their names whipped sharper than fear. Everyone had needs that were hard to fulfill. The Sicilian crowd, 2 was company, 3 a crowd, even then became more and more famous and more rich. Nothing was beyond or beneath them. Inigo's blade was flashing again, more than ever like lightning. The Turk's strength grew more prodigious with the months, but the hunchback was the leader. There was never doubt. Without him, Inigo knew where he would be, on his back, begging wine in some alley entrance. The Sicilian's word was not just law, it was gospel. So when he said, "Kill the man in black," all other possibilities ceased to exist. The man in black had to die. And that is a great stopping point.
Oh, come on! Over an hour.
And I think that we can stop there and we can read all about Fezzik tomorrow. So, hit the like button if you're enjoying the story. I'm going to just go ahead and set the bookmark right there. I think, Daniel, let me see the sword. I think Daniel has, this is a replica of the six-fingered sword right here.
No, it isn't.
That's mine.
All right. So, we've got likes on the replica of the sword. That's good.
That's mine.
Okay, so I think Kimmy's got a picture to show us, and then we're going to go. Go ahead. Yay, nice artwork, Kimmy. All right, so you guys have a great night. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you again tomorrow. God bless you, and have a good night. I already said